Alexei Ravenwood held a crystal glass, its surface reflecting the myriad lights of the metropolis hall. Each sip of champagne seemed to halt halfway to his heart, settling like a stone in his stomach. He gazed at his reflection in the window's polished surface. A flawless Brioni suit, a practiced smile honed over 6 years in London, a perfect mask concealing the boy from the residential area who once simply dreamt of happiness. "Sasha, where are you drifting?" Anastasia's voice pulled him back to reality. Her slender fingers, adorned with a flawless manicure, rested on his sleeve. The touch was light as a butterfly's wing, and just as alien. "Sorry," he mumbled, his thoughts already on the presentation, a lie delivered with an ease that frightened him. Anastasia nodded understandingly. The daughter of an oil tycoon, she was accustomed to men whose minds were perpetually occupied with business and figures. Perhaps that's why they were suited to each other. Two people who had become mere functions of their own ambitions. Alexei surveyed the engagement party. Moscow's elite, socialites, politicians, businessmen, all smiled at him, raising their glasses to his success, to his impending marriage to a woman whose lineage opened the right doors. So why did this anxiety gnaw at him like a starving rat? "You achieved everything you ever dreamed of," he reminded himself. His own investment fund, an apartment overlooking the Moskva River, a bride worthy of a magazine cover. Why then did these accomplishments feel like empty boxes wrapped in glittering paper? He approached Gregory, his childhood friend, the only person who knew the real Alexei, with 2 glasses of whiskey. "Let's go to the terrace." The cool May breeze washed over them, carrying the scent of lilac from Alexander Garden. The city sprawled below, vibrant and pulsing, indifferent to his inner turmoil. "You look like you're at your own funeral, not an engagement party," Gregory said, handing him a glass. Alexei chuckled, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. A few strands immediately fell out of place, as if trying to remind him of the unruly curl he once sported. "Everything's going according to plan, isn't it?" He shrugged, avoiding his friend's gaze. "The plan you made when we were 23, when you left for London with 1 suitcase and a grudge against the world." Gregory shook his head. "People change, Sasha. Plans should too." Alexei felt a tightness in his chest. How many times had he woken up in his London flat overlooking the Thames, feeling this emptiness? How many times had the achievements he craved crumbled to dust the moment they materialized? "I invited Lai," the words tumbled out before he could stop them. Gregory choked on his whiskey. "What did you do?" "I invited Lai to the wedding," Alexei said defiantly, as if throwing himself off a cliff. "Why?" Gregory's voice held undisguised concern. "What are you trying to achieve?" What was he trying to achieve? Alexei didn't know. Perhaps to see the acknowledgement of his success in her eyes, or to prove to himself that the past no longer held power over him. "She was a part of my life." He turned away, looking out at the city. "I want to show her that everything worked out, that you were right when you chose a career over her." Gregory finished for him. "Lex, listen to yourself. You're getting married to one woman and inviting another to prove something to her." Alexander wanted to retort, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, a picture from 6 years ago sprang to mind. Sheremetyevo Airport, the boarding announcement for his flight, and Lai clutching his hand so tightly as if she could physically hold him back. SVO 6 years ago. The SVO International Departures Lounge buzzed like a beehive. People hurried, embraced, said goodbye, some for a week, some forever. Alexander stood with his ticket in hand, trying to ignore the damp sheen in Lai's eyes. "It's only for a year, maybe 2, he said, not believing his own words. "I'll gain experience in an international company, and we'll live completely differently." Lai looked at him as if she could see right through him. He both feared and loved this aspect of her gaze. Her chestnut hair escaped from her hastily gathered ponytail, and a pillow imprint still remained on her cheek. She had rushed to the airport straight from her university dormitory without properly waking up. "I know you won't come back in a year." She spoke quietly, but each word hit its mark. "You found your ticket to another life. I see it in your eyes, Lex." He wanted to object, to say that it was all for their shared future, but the lie stuck in his throat. Deep down, he knew London was his chance to escape not only financial constraints, but also the life that felt confining.
"Lie, he began, but she pressed a finger to his lips. "I need to tell you something important." Her voice trembled. At that moment, the boarding announcement for his flight was made. Lai fell silent, as if this announcement were a sign of fate. What did you want to say?" he asked, already knowing the choice had been made. She looked at him with a long gaze, in which an entire universe of unspoken words could be read. Then she shook her head and smiled faintly. "It doesn't matter. Go, your new life awaits." He kissed her. For the last time, not yet understanding this, she pressed herself against him as if trying to remember every cell, and then pulled away first, gently pushing him towards passport control. As he passed through the gate, he turned around. She stood there, a small figure in the crowd with determination on her face and tears she wouldn't let herself shed. At that moment, he almost turned back. "Almost. You're not answering."
Gregory's voice brought Alexander back to the present. "Why do you need this?" Alexander took a sip of whiskey, letting the burn in his throat drown out the pain of the memories. "I want to close this gestalt," he said, a phrase he'd picked up from his London psychotherapist, to show her and himself that everything wasn't. Gregory watched him with that mixture of pity and irritation only true friends can afford. "Are you sure the result was worth the sacrifice?" he asked softly. "Look at yourself, Lex. You're standing at your own engagement party and talking about another woman. Are you happy?" The question hung in the air like the smoke from the cigarettes they once secretly smoked behind the school. Lex wanted to answer affirmatively. It was the only right answer, but his tongue wouldn't utter the lie to the only person who saw right through him. "I'm successful," he finally said. "Isn't that the same thing?" Gregory shook his head. "You know it's not. And by the way, about Lee?" He hesitated. "Do you even have any idea what you'll do if she accepts the invitation? If she comes?" Lex's heart skipped a beat. Deep down, he was sure she would refuse, that his invitation would remain a mere symbolic gesture. The thought that she might actually appear in his new life, real flesh and blood, not a ghost of memories, evoked a strange mixture of panic and something he didn't dare name. "She won't come," he said, with a confidence he didn't feel. "You don't know her now?" Gregory shrugged. 6 years. A long time. People change." 6 years echoed in Lex's head. A whole life nestled between his departure and this day. Who was she now? What did she do? Was she happy? His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out mechanically and froze, staring at the screen. A new message from a contact he hadn't opened in years, but hadn't been able to delete either. "Thank you for the invitation. I will come. L." 4 words that shattered the illusion of control over his own life. Lex felt the ground slip from beneath his feet, the air grow thick and impenetrable. "What is it?" Gregory asked, noticing the change in his face. Lex silently handed him the phone. Gregory read the message and whistled. "Well, my friend, you wanted to summon a ghost from the past? They answered your call." He put a hand on Lex's shoulder. "And now what?" Lex looked at the lights of the night, Moscow, feeling the carefully constructed edifice of his new life crumble within him. What now? He didn't know. For the first time in many years, the future seemed utterly unpredictable. He took a deep breath, feeling a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. Now they would find out if it had all been worthwhile. Twilight gathered over the city, promising a night full of difficult reflections. Somewhere in this vast metropolis, Lai was perhaps also looking at those same lights, holding the invitation that could change everything. Lai reread the invitation, holding it by the fingertips as if it were poisonous paper, the gold embossing, the calligraphic script, the paper so thick it seemed it could survive an apocalypse. Everything screamed of money and status, exactly what he had left behind, leaving her heartbroken, pregnant, and desperately alone in a cold Moscow university dormitory. Alexei and Anastasia Dawn invite you to share their joy. She smirked. Joy. As if that word meant anything to a person capable of sacrificing a genuine feeling for a line on a resume. Mama, what's this? Alec, her 5-year-old son, appeared beside her, pressing his warm side against her thigh. Intelligent eyes, an exact copy of his father's, gazed curiously at the gleaming invitation. Lai's heart ached, those eyes. Sometimes she couldn't look into them without feeling a phantom pain. A wedding invitation. Mechanically, she stroked her son's unruly hair. And we'll go, there will be cake. He bounced in place, and Lai involuntarily smiled. Children possessed an amazing ability to see simple joys where adults found only reasons for sorrow. I don't know, Bunny. She knelt, bringing herself to his level. It's complicated. A whimpering sound came from the next room. Matilda had woken up. Lai put down the invitation and hurried to her daughter. The girl sat in her crib. Dark curls were tousled from sleep, her cheeks wet with tears. Matushka, the little girl whispered, in a mixture of Russian and Tatar, as her grandmother, Lee's mother, Hazel, had taught her. I dreamt of the sea. Lai scooped her daughter into her arms, inhaling the familiar scent of a child's hair. Matilda was a copy of her mother, the same cheekbones, the same eye shape, the same stubborn chin, the legacy of Croda women who survived against all odds. Will you be able to look them in the eyes? Her mother's voice echoed in her head. After everything that had happened, Lee held her daughter tighter, feeling the little heartbeat next to her own. 6 years ago, standing at Sheremetyevo Airport, she hadn't found the courage to tell Alexei about her pregnancy. Something, pride or intuition, had stopped her. And now, looking at her children, she understood it had been a gift of fate. If he had stayed out of a sense of duty, they would all have been unhappy. She seated Matilda next to Alec at the table, pouring milk into their cups with cartoon characters. An ordinary morning, her little universe which she had created herself, without him, against all odds. The invitation lay on the edge of the table, gleaming with gold embossing in the morning sun. A small bomb capable of destroying the world she had worked so hard to build. "You haven't even told him," a voice of conscience whispered. "He has a right to know." But did he? A man who chose career over love. A man who hadn't tried to contact her once in 6 years to find out how she was. Lai walked to the window. Their apartment near Chistio Prudi was small, but it was their own, bought with money earned from translations and tutoring, while she finished her studies with a newborn in her arms. Every square metre of this home was a testament to her strength and perseverance. "I'll go." The decision came suddenly, like a leap from a cliff. "I'll go and look him in the eyes, and I'll take the children with me. Eventually, sooner or later, the truth always finds its way to the light." Arkhangelskoye estate, bathed in the May sunshine, like a set for a movie about the beautiful life. A procession of luxury cars, ladies in hats resembling exotic birds, and men in suits costing as much as a small apartment. Lai stood at the gate, holding Alexei and Matilda's hands tightly, feeling like an uninvited guest at someone else's celebration. It's like a fairy tale, isn't it? Alexei whispered, mesmerized by the fountains and blossoming flower beds. Matilda clung to her leg, slightly intimidated by the noise and splendor. Yes, darling. Lai swallowed the lump in her throat, a fairy tale from which she had been written out 6 years ago. Now she was returning, not as the naive girl she once was, but as a woman who had known pain, strength, and the joy of motherhood. She walked down the marble path, feeling the guests' gazes on her. Her simple ivory linen dress bought from a small shop on Maraseka looked both understated and folk-like amidst the glittering designer outfits, but she walked straight, head held high, as her grandmother had taught her. Never show that you're hurting. Hold your back straight, even if everything inside is burning. Somewhere deep within the estate, an orchestra played. Live music filled the park, mingling with birdsong and the low hum of conversation. Matilda started to dance. Her childlike spontaneity eased Lai's inattention. Guests were settling into snow-white chairs in front of an elegant archway entwined with flowers, the place where, in an hour, Alexander was to say "I do" to another woman. Li paused, uncertain. What was she doing here? Why had she come? Lyudmila? A familiar voice made her turn. Gregory, looking slightly fuller but still in a sharp suit, subtly reminiscent of his student days. You actually came? His eyes showed surprise and something more, as if he knew more than he was saying. I came. She smiled, feeling a strange relief at encountering someone from her past. Meet Alexei and Matilda, my children. She said it simply, without drama, but she saw Gregory's pupils dilate as he shifted his gaze between the children and her, instantly registering the obvious resemblance between Alexei and his former friend. Yours. He stumbled, unable to finish the sentence. Yes, she nodded. Mine and his. He knows. Gregory lowered his voice, though the children were already distracted by a butterfly flitting over a rose bush. No, Lai shook her head. This is what I wanted to tell him at the airport. What he refused to hear. Gregory ran a hand over his face as if trying to erase the shock. Do you understand what's about to happen? Do you understand what you're doing? She looked at her children, at Alexei, so much like his father, and at Matilda with her stubborn chin. Children raised without a father, but surrounded by love, her little warriors. I understand, she said softly. It's time for the truth, Gregory, whatever it may be. Alexander stood by the window in the groom's room, absent-mindedly adjusting his cufflinks. In the mirror, a man looked back at him. He barely recognized the man in the mirror, polished, self-assured, with perfect hair and vacant eyes. Do you really want this? He asked himself for the 100th time that morning. His phone remained silent in his pocket. He checked it every 5 minutes, waiting for what? A message from Lai, a sign from heaven to resolve his doubts? The door opened, and Gregory entered. His face was pale, as if he'd seen a ghost. She's here, he said without preamble. Alexei's heart skipped a beat, then pounded double time. Lai! He didn't recognize his own voice. Gregory nodded, then took a deep breath. Alexei, there's something you need to know before you go out there. But Alexei wasn't listening. He threw open the door and strode quickly through the corridors of the Arkhangelskoye estate, past surprised guests and photographers, past the bewildered parents of the bride. Something propelled him forward, Perhaps the same feeling he'd buried 6 years ago at Sheremetyevo Airport. He saw her immediately. She stood by the fountain. Sunlight played in her hair, making it almost golden. It was still Lai, yet completely different. She possessed an inner strength, a dignity she hadn't had before. She was beautiful. Then he noticed the children. A boy and a girl, about 5 or 6 years old. The boy had a shock of unruly dark hair, and the girl had serious eyes framed by fluffy lashes. They held Lai's hands like two small anchors, keeping her grounded. He froze, unable to take another step. Something inside him screamed, demanding he acknowledge the obvious, but his mind refused to accept it. Lee uttered his name without a smile, simply stating his existence. "Lai," he breathed, feeling the ground slip away from beneath his feet. They are—" The boy looked up, directly at him, and Alexei met eyes he saw every morning, in the mirror eyes he'd inherited from his father, who'd inherited them from his grandfather. It was Alec. Lai placed a hand on her son's head. And that was Matilda. The math was merciless. 5.5 years and 9 months ago he'd stood in the SVO International Departures Lounge, choosing between love and career. He couldn't finish the sentence. The air caught in his lungs. "Yours," she said simply, without accusation, without anger. Just a statement of fact that altered his entire life in an instant. Guests began to approach. Out of the corner of his eye, Alexei saw Anastasia freeze, her father's eyes narrow, and the ladies in expensive dresses whisper. He heard the click of cameras. Tomorrow, this would be in all the society magazines. The heir to the Ravenwood fortune meets his illegitimate children at his own wedding. The scandal of the year. But it all seemed so insignificant, so distant. Only those eyes mattered, exact copies of his own, looking at him with childish curiosity and openness. "Hello," the boy said, extending a small hand. "I'm Alec. Are you the groom? You have a nice suit?" His son's voice sounded so natural and so right, as if the missing piece fell into place in the puzzle of his life. Alexei knelt, bringing himself level with the boy, and gently, as if afraid of burning himself, shook the outstretched hand. "Hello, Alec," he said, his voice trembling. "Yes, I'm the groom." A little girl hid behind her mother, but peered out curiously, studying him with her dark eyes. Lai's eyes, the eyes of the woman he had never stopped loving, no matter how hard he tried to convince himself otherwise. "Sasha, what's going on?" Anastasia Dawn's voice, cold and demanding, pulled him back to the reality of the wedding that was crumbling before 100 guests. He slowly rose, still looking at his children's children, then shifted his gaze to Lai. In her eyes there was no triumph or malice, only the calm dignity of a woman who had gone through fire and survived. He turned to Anastasia Dawn, her parents, the guests, the photographers, the life he had planned, the future he had built, brick by brick. And suddenly, everything became crystal clear. "I'm sorry," he said to Anastasia Dawn. "The wedding is off." A murmur rose around them. The flashes of cameras blended into a continuous line of light. But Alexei saw only 3 people in front of him, the woman he had let go 6 years ago, and 2 children whose existence he hadn't suspected until this moment. "We need to talk," he said to Lai, feeling one life crumble and another, perhaps, begin. A shadow of a smile flickered across her face, not triumphant, but understanding, the smile of a woman who knew the price of mistakes and forgiveness. "Yes," she simply replied. "We need to talk." Alec looked at them both with childlike wisdom, as if understanding far more than he could express in words. Little Matilda finally emerged from behind her mother's skirt, and to everyone's surprise, offered Alexei her tiny hand. "Hi," she said, seriously. "I'm Matilda." And in that childlike gesture there was more forgiveness and hope than in all the words they could have said to each other. Time stretched like taffy, viscous, sticky, unbearably sweet and painful at the same time. Alexei looked at the children, and the blood in his veins turned to ice, then to fire. His body remembered what his mind refused to accept. These children were his flesh, his blood, his unrealized future. Breathe, he reminded himself. His lungs felt constricted, refusing to perform their basic function. The boy Alec's head was tilted slightly to the left, just as his own father used to tilt his head when he didn't understand something. This gesture had been passed down in the Ravenwood family for generations, a silent testament to kinship stronger than any DNA test. "Who's that uncle, Mum?" Alec asked, tugging at Lai's hand. "Why is he looking at us like that?" Matilda, clinging to her mother's leg, also looked up. "Uncle's crying," she whispered, pointing at Alexei's face. And only then did he realize that tears were indeed streaming down his cheeks. Tears flowed, uninvited, unwelcome, at a wedding that was crumbling with each passing second. "Alexei." Anastasia's voice, fractured mid-syllable, rang out like shattered crystal. "What's happening here?" She stood ramrod straight. Her Vera Wang gown emphasized her aristocratic pallor, and in her eyes was something her social circle never displayed publicly: rage. It was Alexei's voice that broke. "These are my children." The confession burst out before he could process it, as if this truth had waited too long to see the light of day. "You've gone mad." Anastasia took a step forward, her perfect French manicure digging into his sleeve. "How can you say such a thing? You're seeing these children for the first time in your life." "Your children?" Alec echoed, and his eyes— God, those eyes were the spitting image of Olivia Ravenwood's widened. "You're our dad." The world froze. Even the birds, it seemed, stopped singing. 3 words, spoken in a child's voice, destroyed everything Alexei had built for 6 years. Or perhaps it built something that was long overdue. "You're a con artist." Anastasia hissed, turning to Lyra. Her perfect socialite facade cracked, revealing what usually lay hidden behind a mask of breeding and wealth. "This is a set-up. You dragged your brats here to ruin our wedding." Lyra paled, but didn't flinch. Instinctively, she shielded the children with her arms, just as her mother had done when her drunken father returned home to their small apartment in Kazan. "Don't you dare," she said quietly, but with such force that Anastasia involuntarily fell silent. "Don't you dare speak like that about my children." The guests crowded around, transforming into avid spectators of the unexpected drama. Someone filmed on their phone, others whispered, covering their mouths with their hands. A social scandal was about to go viral. "Annie, please." Alexei tried to calm his bride, but she pushed his hand away. "You knew." Her voice trembled with fury. "You knew all this time and said nothing." "No." He shook his head. "I didn't know. Look at him." Anastasia jabbed a finger towards Alec. "That bastard is your spitting image. Don't tell me you didn't suspect." Lyra felt Alec tense. He didn't understand the words, but intonation was a universal language that children understood better than adults. "Bastard," he repeated, puzzled. "What does that mean, Mom?" At that moment, Victor Sterling, Anastasia's father, a man whose name graced the front pages of Forbes and was whispered in the corridors of the Kremlin, pushed his way through the crowd. His face resembled a thundercloud. "Ravenwood," he said with icy fury. "This is some kind of joke. It's a very, very bad one." Alexei straightened. Years spent in the city had taught him to take a punch, but now more than his business reputation was at stake. "It's not a joke, Viktor Ivanovich." He spoke calmly, though inside everything trembled. I only just found out myself. And you believe it? Rudnev nodded dismissively. Lyra held Matilda close, whispering ancient Tatar words of comfort in a low voice, words passed down through generations of mothers and daughters. Shash, kukulka, vese korosho, she murmured. Balakai, yerogem, moje malenkoje serce, vese budet, korosho. Sweetheart, little doll, everything is all right. Little one, my little heart, everything will be all right. Anastasia laughed, a sharp, unnatural sound. Fantastic, she sneered. Now we have national colour. Perhaps you'll do a little gypsy dance for us before you try to extort money? Lyra closed her eyes, a sharp pain piercing her chest. The same contempt, the same words, the same tone. She'd heard it all her life, at school where children taunted her for her unusual surname. At university, where a professor marvelled at her success. Imagine, even Tatar girls can be smart. At job interviews, where she was questioned about whether her religious beliefs would interfere with weekend work. Don't cry. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Don't give them the satisfaction. She opened her eyes and met Anastasia's gaze. My name is Lyra Hakimova, she said clearly. I'm a graduate of MGIMO's International Relations faculty. I speak 5 languages and I'm raising 2 wonderful children. I deserve respect at the very least because I am a human being. Her words hung in the air, simple yet weighty, silencing even Victor Sterling for a moment. You promised us millions, Sterling hissed, turning back to Alexei. Connections in London, contracts with Arabs. And now, everything down the drain because of... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Alexei's voice turned icy. What's your words, Viktor Ivanovich? Sterling narrowed his eyes. You understand who you're dealing with, boy? I can destroy you with one phone call, or your fund, your investors, your reputation. Everything will turn to dust. Alexei felt something ancient awaken within him, a protective rage, a readiness to fight. The genes of hunters living in deerskins when Sterling's ancestors hadn't even learned to make fire. He might have nodded, but today he learned that he had children, and that was infinitely more important than any money or connections. Sasha! Anastasia cried, grabbing his jacket lapel. Are you throwing me over, our wedding, our future, because of this? He gently removed her hands. I'm sorry, Annie, there won't be a wedding. The slap echoed through the air. Alexei's cheek burned, but the pain was sobering. For years in the financial world he'd dealt with numbers, graphs, predictable risks. Now he was stepping into the unknown, and strangely, for the first time in years, he felt alive. Sterling stepped forward, his face crimson. I will destroy you, pup. You'll be kicked out of Forbes, out of the city. No decent house will take you in. You'll end up a bum. Alexei looked at him and suddenly understood. The ghost of Sterling's father, a Soviet factory worker, had never let go of his son despite all the billions. The fear, poverty had chased him all his life like a rabid dog, never letting him stop and simply live. You know, Viktor Ivanovich, he almost smiled, the thing to fear isn't poverty, it's the emptiness that remains when money doesn't bring happiness. The audience gasped. No one dared speak to Sterling like that, a man whose fortune was estimated at 1/3 of a small European country's annual budget. You'll regret this, hissed the oligarch, turning away. Let's go, Anastasia, immediately. But Anastasia, unexpectedly, remained where she stood. Papa, she said quietly, why do you always decide for me? Sterling froze, as if struck by lightning. What, I'm sorry, I asked. A strange firmness entered her voice. Why do you always decide for me? Who to love, who to befriend, whom to marry? Alexei watched her with astonishment. In their 3 years together, he had never seen Anastasia defy her father. "Because I know what's best for you," Sterling cut him off. "Now let's go." "No." Anastasia shook her head. "I'm sorry, Lex. This isn't how I imagined our wedding. But you know," she glanced at Lyra and the children, "maybe it's for the best. I wanted a successful marriage, and you, it seems, still love her." She turned to the guests. "Thank you for coming. The wedding is off, but the banquet is paid for. Enjoy the reception." And holding her head high, Anastasia Sterling walked away, leaving her father gasping with impotent fury. "Now explain this to me," Alexei said softly, tugging at his mother's hand. "Is this uncle really our dad?" The guests dispersed across the grounds of the Arkhangelskoye estate. Some went to the buffet tables, others gathered in small groups discussing the scandal of the century. Lyra knelt down, bringing herself to her son's eye level. "Yes," she nodded. "He's your father." "Why didn't he live with us?" the boy asked seriously. "Didn't he love us?" Alexei stood beside her, feeling the simple child's question strike harder than any of Sterling's threats. "He didn't know about you," Lyra answered gently. "He left a long time ago when you were very little, when you were still in my tummy." Alexei frowned, processing the information. "Will he live with us now?" he asked, with unexpected practicality. "We don't have much space. He'll have to sleep on the sofa, or we'll have to buy a cot." Lyra couldn't help but laugh, feeling the tension of the last few hours release with that laughter. The sound was so unexpected and genuine that Alexei suddenly realized he had missed it for 6 years. A laughter that wasn't social politeness or a reaction to a good joke, but simply an expression of pure joy of life. "Aleshka," she hugged her son, "this is very complicated. Grown-ups make everything so complicated. We need to talk first." Matilda, still clinging to her dress, suddenly reached out and touched Alexei's cheek. "Why are you crying?" she asked, looking at him with huge, bittersweet chocolate-colored eyes. Lai's response was, "Because I'm happy," he replied sincerely, deeply upset that he hadn't known her sooner. "It's like getting an ice cream cone and dropping it," the little girl philosophically clarified. Happiness and disappointment intertwined. Alexei couldn't help but laugh through his tears. This 5-year-old girl had just described his entire life with a single, childish metaphor. "Yes," he nodded. "Very similar, Lai." He turned to her. "We really need to talk. We should leave here." She nodded, picking up Matilda and taking Alex's hand. "Your car?" she asked practically. "The hell with the car," he shook his head. "Let's go to the bus stop, like in the old days, remember?" And then, as if overcoming an invisible barrier, he reached out and almost shyly touched her cheek with a light, weightless touch that took their breath away. 6 years and 9 months ago. Vorobayovi Gori. "Imagine how we'll be living in 10 years, Lai asked, lying on a spread-out blanket and gazing at the evening sky. "I want a small house, just ours, with a garden where apple trees grow, like grandma's in the village." Alexei lay beside her, their little fingers touching. An almost innocent touch that sent shivers down their spines. "And I want us to have 2 children, he said. He turned his head, meeting her gaze. "A boy and a girl," she smiled. "How the daughter will look like you." He said it with such conviction that it took her breath away. "With your eyes and your character. And you're not scared?" She laughed. 2 stubborn Kakimov women in the house. "They'll be Ravenwood women," he shrugged. "And no, I'm not scared. I want our children to be strong, like you." She rolled onto her side, propping herself up on her hand, and studying his face so seriously as if trying to memorize every line. "What if it doesn't work out?" she asked softly. "What if we can't afford that house? What if it's hard?" He plucked a blade of grass and thoughtfully twirled it between his fingers. You know, I think happiness isn't about living without problems, but about solving them together with the person you love. She smiled that special smile she reserved only for him, and he thought that for this smile he would move mountains. You're very wise, Alexei Ravenwood. She touched his cheek with her fingertips. For a guy from the economics department. And you're very beautiful, Lyra. He caught her hand and pressed it to his lips. For a girl from the diplomatic service. They laughed easily, carefree as only very young and very much in love people can laugh, confident that the whole world was at their feet and the future would only be bright. Above Moscow, the first stars were lighting up. Ahead was a whole night, a whole life, and they were sure they would spend it together. Remember Vorobyovi Gori? Alexei asked as they boarded the bus. The children settled by the window, mesmerized by the city gliding past. I remember, Lai nodded. We talked about a house with an apple orchard and 2 children. He glanced at Alec and Matilda, the children. She smiled faintly. Life sometimes grants wishes in the strangest ways. He gently covered her hand with his. She didn't pull away. I don't deserve this, he whispered. You raised them alone. You managed everything. And I... You made a choice, she shrugged. So did I. We both have to live with the consequences. He looked at the children, his children, whom he hadn't known until today. A miracle, flesh and blood, his second chance at a real life. I'm not asking for anything I'm not entitled to, he said softly, and to be a part of their lives, if you'll let me. Lai looked out the window at Moscow rushing by, the city that had witnessed their student romance, their breakup, and now their reunion. You know, she finally said, my grandfather used to say, Iski dus doshman bulmas. An old friend doesn't become an enemy. What does that mean? He asked, intrigued by the unfamiliar melody of the words. It means we all get a second chance. She turned to him. Even you, Lex Ravenwood. Matilda, as if sensing the importance of the moment, began to sing in a thin, childlike voice, a lullaby in a mix of Russian and Tatar, the same song Lai used to sing to them every night. A song about stars, a mother's love, and the road home. The bus rolled through the evening Moscow. Inside, a man, a woman, and 2 children, not your typical family, but perhaps the one that was always meant to be. Oiga Katik, Lai whispered as Matilda finished singing. What does that mean? Lex asked. Let's go home, she smiled. To where the apple trees await us. And he thought that the 6 years spent chasing mirages had finally led him to real life, a real home, real love. Lai's apartment greeted them with the scent of cinnamon and mint tea, the aromas of childhood she had brought from her grandmother's house in Kazan, her most precious inheritance. The small rooms were filled with light, not from expensive lamps, but from children's drawings on the walls, worn books with dog-eared pages, and plants reaching for the windows. Every object had a story, a soul. Lex stopped at the threshold, as if afraid to disturb the fragile balance of this world, a world built without him, against him, despite all the hardships he would never fully understand. Come in, Lai said, taking Matilda's coat. This is yours now, too. She hesitated. Not a home, of course, but a place where your children live. Alec eyed Lex with the undisguised curiosity of an explorer discovering a new species. There was no resentment, no prejudice in his gaze. Only a thirst to understand the unknown. Well, do you have a car? He asked, without preamble, settling onto the worn sofa and swinging his superhero-themed socks. And do you really live in London? Do people really walk around with umbrellas like Mary Poppins? Lex sat down beside him, leaving a space between them. The distance was just right, not too close to frighten, yet not too far to miss a single moment. "Oh yes, I have a car," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady, even though his heart threatened to leap from his chest. "And yes, I lived in London, but not everyone there carries an umbrella, although it does rain a lot." Alec's eyes lit up. "I saw Big Ben. We watched a Paddington Bear cartoon with Mom," Alec continued. "Big Ben was in it." "I saw it, of course," Alexei nodded. "I even went inside. It has enormous clockwork mechanisms, can you imagine? Wheels the size of a person." "Wow!" Alec jumped. "Matilda, did you hear?"
Inside Big Ben, the wheels are as big as a person. Matilda, who had been playing with a doll in the corner, raised her head. Unlike her brother, she remained wary, studying the stranger from under her brow. In that small figure, Alexei saw Lai, the woman he'd met in his first year at MGIMO. The same stubborn chin, the same furrow between her brows when she concentrated. "Who are you?" the girl asked directly, with the disarming honesty only children and very wise old men possess. "Why did you come?" The question, simple yet complex, hung in the air. Lai, pouring tea in the kitchen, froze with the kettle in her hand. Alexei felt his throat go dry. How could he explain to a 5-year-old what he himself didn't fully understand? How could he talk about fears, ambitions, youthful mistakes, decisions made in moments of weakness, the price paid for every choice? He stammered, meeting his daughter's demanding gaze. "I'm your dad, Matilda." She frowned, processing the information.
"But we don't have a dad," she said with childlike, merciless logic. "Mum says he went on a long business trip." She enunciated business trip syllable by syllable, clearly repeating something she'd heard from adults. "I was on a business trip." He tried to smile, but it came out crooked. "A very long one, but now I'm back." "Forever?" Alec asked immediately, moving closer. "Will you live with us now?" Lai placed the cups on the coffee table with such force that tea splashed onto the worn wooden surface. The dark stain spread like a symbol of everything unspoken between them. "That's a very complicated question, sweetheart," she said, sitting beside her son and dabbing at the stain with a napkin. "The grown-ups need to discuss a lot of things." "But he's our dad," Alec insisted stubbornly. "You and he have known each other for a long time. You told Grandma he loved you once." Lai paled, then flushed. The way children remember every casually dropped word, every involuntary sigh, every unshed tear, it's both a blessing and a curse of motherhood. "Yes," she managed a strained smile. "When you loved me, a long time ago, in another life." Those words hit Alexei harder than a physical blow. That other life was the 6 years he spent chasing phantom successes in the London fog, while she coped alone with morning sickness. They had weathered storms, sleepless nights, first steps, first words, illnesses, everything a couple should face together. The doorbell rang unexpectedly sharply, making everyone jump. Lai, rising, instinctively smoothed her hair. A deeply ingrained habit of appearing composed even when the world crumbled around her. "That's probably your mother," she said to Alexei, avoiding his gaze. "I called her while you were in the bathroom." He nodded, unsure whether to thank her or be angry about the decision. Olivia Ravenwood, his mother, deserved to know the truth, but he wasn't ready for this meeting. Not like this, not now, not after everything that had happened. When Lai opened the door, a woman stood on the threshold, ravaged by the years. Wrinkles etched her once beautiful face. Her hair, once dark, was now almost entirely grey, but her posture remained straight, the signature bearing of the Ravenwoods, unbroken by years or circumstance. "Ludochka," Liv breathed, embracing Lai with unexpected strength. "My girl." Lai froze for a moment in the embrace, then relaxed, allowing the warmth to penetrate the armor she had forged during years of loneliness. Olivia Ravenwood, she whispered. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. You shouldn't be the one apologizing. The woman shook her head. She entered the apartment, her gaze instantly finding the children. Alex stood, straightening his small back, serious and ready to protect his sister and mother, as he always had, as he had learned to do without a father's example. Hello, he said clearly. I'm Alexei, and who are you? Olivia Ravenwood pressed a hand to her mouth, unable to contain her emotions. In this small boy she saw her husband, her son, her father, the entire Ravenwood lineage, continued against all odds. I'm your grandmother, little one, she said, kneeling to be at his level. Your father's mother. We have a grandmother, Matilda chimed in, peeking from behind her brother. She lives in Kazan and makes echpokmak. Can you? Olivia Ravenwood laughed through her tears. No, sweetheart. I don't know how to make echpokmak, but I can learn if you show me. They're Tatar pastries, Matilda explained importantly, with meat and potatoes, very delicious. I'm sure they are, Olivia Ravenwood nodded. May I hug you both? Alec looked at his mother, seeking confirmation that this unfamiliar woman was trustworthy. Lai nodded, and the boy stepped into his newly found grandmother's embrace. Matilda hesitated for a second, then also allowed herself to be hugged, at first tensely, then more freely, intuitively, responding to the genuine love. Alexei watched the scene, feeling a wave of shame mixed with hope wash over him. His mother, a woman who had endured the early death of her husband and raised her son alone, now held his children in her arms. Children he hadn't known, hadn't seen, hadn't raised. And somewhere in the attic of her London flat, undoubtedly, were toys she had never given them. She distributed them, believing that someday she would have grandchildren. Lex, Liv raised her eyes to him, eyes full of both reproach and forgiveness. How had this happened? He shook his head, finding no words. How could he explain that ambition had eclipsed everything, that his career had seemed the only way to prove his worth, that the fear of poverty, the fear of being nothing, the fear of repeating his prematurely deceased father's fate had driven him forward, not allowing him to look back? I'm sorry, Mom, he uttered, the only thing that made sense now. Liv stood up, not releasing her grandchildren from her embrace. It's not to me you should apologize first. Her gaze flickered to Lyra, standing by the window. Proud, unbroken, she had created a whole world for her children, a world in which there was no place for their father, because he himself had rejected it. Children, Lyra approached Alec and Matilda. Hazel brought you gifts. Why don't you go to your room and see what's there? Liv nodded gratefully, handing the children a package, which they carried away to the bedroom with joyful squeals. When the door closed behind them, Lyra turned to Alexander. Her eyes, always so warm, now resembled shards of dark ice. Well, she said quietly. But in that quietness there was more power than in screams. Are you satisfied? You got what you wanted. A successful career, a position in society, a wealthy fiancé. Everything he had dreamed of, leaving SVO International Departures Lounge. His mother quietly went to the kitchen, intuitively understanding that this conversation should take place only between the two of them. I didn't know. He took a step towards her, but she retreated, as if his closeness burned her. I swear if I had known about the children... What would she have done? Would he have abandoned his precious career, returned to a pregnant girl from a university dormitory with an unknown last name, without connections or prospects? Don't make a fool of me, Lex. I knew you too well. Her words, bitter as wormwood, but fair, hit the mark precisely. Could he confidently say that he would have acted differently? That at 23, blinded by ambition and a thirst to prove his worth to the world, he would have made a different choice. You didn't even try to contact me, she continued, and each word was a thorn piercing his conscience. 6 years, Lex, not a call, not a message, as if we had never existed in your life. He remained silent, understanding that any justification would sound false. He wanted to say that he was afraid that every time he dialed her number, he hung up at the last moment, that he checked her social media pages but didn't dare to write, that on sleepless London nights he imagined how she could have been beside him. Do you think it was easy for me? He finally asked. To leave everything, to start from scratch. She laughed bitterly without a trace of mirth. Easy? She repeated. You want to talk about what's easy and what's difficult? Fine. She crossed her arms over her chest as if defending herself. Difficult, she continued, is when you're nauseous every morning and you have to rush to classes. What one missed semester meant expulsion and the loss of the university dormitory. It's hard when in your 7th month of pregnancy you're mopping office floors at night because daytime work is no longer an option with a growing belly. It's hard when, in the middle of labour, you realise the only person holding your hand is a nurse who's paid pennies for it. It's hard when your child is sick, with a temperature of almost 104 degrees T, 40 degrees C, and you can't call in sick from work because you'll just be fired, and then you'll have nothing to eat. Her voice trembled, but she continued, as if a dam had burst and years of unspoken pain poured out. But you know what the hardest thing is, Lex? The hardest thing is when your 4-year-old son asks, "Now, Mummy, why does Peter from kindergarten have a dad but we don't?" And you don't know what to answer because the truth will break his little heart and a lie will one day turn against you. She fell silent, catching her breath. In the small apartment, it became unusually quiet, as if the very air had frozen, saturated with the pain of her words. "Forgive me," he said, the only thing he could utter. "I know it won't fix anything, but I truly—" She shook her head. "Don't say what you don't believe. I don't need your pity or belated apologies." "Then what do you want?" he asked, feeling lost. "Why did you call my mother? Why did you even come to the wedding?" She looked at him with a long gaze, the gaze of a woman who had gone through fire and water, who had learned to survive where others would have broken. "I didn't come for myself, and not even for you," she said softly. "I came for them." She nodded towards the children's room. "Because no matter what you do with me, you're their father, and they have the right to know you. Let them decide when they grow up what place you'll occupy in their lives." These words contained more nobility than he deserved, and he understood that. In this small woman, whom he had once abandoned for the illusion of success, there was more strength and dignity than in all the successful people he had surrounded himself with in London. "You've become completely different," he said, almost reverently. "Motherhood changes you," she shrugged. "When 2 little lives depend on you, you either become stronger or you break." I didn't have a choice. From the children's room came laughter, pure, carefree laughter of children, unburdened by adult dramas and the pain of the past. This sound, like a ray of sun, cut through the heavy atmosphere between them. "So what now?" Alexander asked. "What will happen to all of us?" Lai approached the window, looking at the courtyard where other children were playing, where life went on as usual despite the dramas unfolding behind closed doors. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Whatever happens between us, you must be in their lives if you truly want that. I want that." He said it with such conviction that she involuntarily turned, more than she had to anything in life. She nodded, as if making an important decision. "Then we'll have to learn anew how to be not together but side by side, for their sake." And if he faltered, hesitant to utter what suddenly seemed so obvious, so right. "What if we try being together too?" She shook her head, not sharply, not angrily, but firmly. "No, Lex. Too much water has gone under the bridge. I'm not that naive girl, and you're not that boy. We can learn to be good parents to our children, but not partners to each other." There was no hatred in her eyes, only the calm resolve of a woman who knows her worth. A woman who had paid too high a price to learn, to rely only on herself, to risk it again. "I understand," he nodded, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and respect. "But I'll be there, if you'll let me." She looked at the nursery door from which came Alec's laughter as he told Hazel something fascinating. She would have to allow it. They had already fallen in love with the idea of having a dad. "You see, children believe in miracles and in people until those people give them reason to lose faith." Her words contained both a challenge and a warning. He accepted both. "Dad, look." Alec ran out of the room holding a model airplane that Liv had brought. Hazel said, "Yeah, it's exactly like the one you used to build as a child." The word "dad," spoken so naturally, so trustingly, burned inside Alexei. He hadn't earned it, hadn't suffered through sleepless nights, hadn't earned it through patient presence in his son's life. But Alec gave it freely, with the unconditional love only children are capable of. Just like then, he knelt down, accepting the model from his son's hands. "I built my first airplane when I was your age." "Really?" The boy's eyes lit up. "Will you help me build this one?" There it was, the first test, the first chance to become a real father, not just a biological donor. Alexei looked at Lai, silently asking for permission. "Of course he will help," she answered for him. "Dad will stay for dinner, and you'll have time to start building." That "dad," from her lips, sounded like an acknowledgement of his right, like a first step towards possible forgiveness, not for his sake, but for the children's. Matilda, who had remained wary until now, approached him with a book. "Will you also read me a bedtime story?" she asked demandingly, looking at him maturely. "Mom always reads before bed." He glanced at the cover. The Little Prince, by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, a book he himself had loved as a child. "Definitely," he promised. "I feel something warm spreading in my chest. If Mum allows me to stay until your bedtime." Lai met his gaze over her daughter's head. Her eyes reflected a whole gamut of emotions: apprehension, distrust, hope, pain, and something else she wasn't ready to name. "I allow it," she nodded. "Only tonight, and then we'll see." That "we'll see" contained more hope than anything he could have counted on that morning. The bridge, destroyed 6 years ago, couldn't be rebuilt in a day, but perhaps a new one could have been built. Slowly, stone by stone, day by day. "Thank you," he said, simply. Liv emerged from the children's room, watching the scene with a mixture of bitterness and joy. Her son had lost 6 years. 6 invaluable years that could never be returned. But perhaps there were many more ahead. "The tea's gone cold," Lai said, heading to the kitchen. "I'll make some more, and I think we have some cherry pie left." "I'll help, Liv." Olivia Ravenwood followed her. Alexei remained in the room with the children. His children, it still sounded like a miracle, who were already dragging him towards toys, books, their world, suddenly inviting him in, despite everything. "You have wonderful children," he said, when Lai returned with a tray. "Thank you for raising them so well." She paused for a moment, not expecting these words, then nodded, accepting the gratitude that was rightfully hers. They truly were good. Her voice held that special pride only a mother can feel. Despite everything, they were growing up happy. That was the main thing. "And will I be happy?" Alex suddenly asked, listening to the adult's conversation with childlike immediacy. Now that I have a mum, a dad, and 2 grandmothers. Lee and Alexei exchanged a glance. 2 people, once in love, separated by circumstances and their own decisions, now bound forever by ties stronger than marriage their shared children. You will be? They replied simultaneously, and for the first time that long day smiled at each other cautiously, tentatively, but sincerely. Evening was falling outside. Somewhere deep in the courtyard, the first spring leaves were unfurling on the apple trees Li had planted 3 years ago. Her own little garden, a promise to herself and her children that everything would be all right. And now, looking at her children, at their father, at this small, nascent family, she allowed herself, for the first time in a long time, to believe that promise was beginning to come true. May gave way to June. Moscow was drowning in greenery that pushed through even the concrete of the residential areas, stubborn as life itself. Lee sat on a bench in Izmailovsky Park, watching Alec and Matilda feed the ducks. Alexei appeared around a bend in the alley, carrying 4 ice cream cones, balancing them with an unexpected dexterity for a financier. 3 weeks. That much time had passed since the wedding had turned into an unexpected reunion. 3 weeks of precarious balance, cautious steps forward, and painful retreats. Pistachio for Matilda, chocolate for Alec, plum for you, and strawberry for me. Alexei handed out the ice cream, sitting on the edge of the bench, leaving a distance between them, invisible, but palpable, like a force field. Thank you, Li nodded, taking her cone. It was strange to see him in casual clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, without his impeccably tailored suits and ties. He seemed both younger and older. Younger without the corporate armor. Older because life had etched its mark on his face, a mark absent 6 years prior. I've rented an apartment not far from you, he said, looking at the children, not at her. On Preobrazhenskaya Square, 2 metro stops away. Lee smiled slightly. Until now he'd stayed in hotels, neutral territory, expensive and impersonal. For how long? She asked, knowing this question encompassed far more than just the lease. I've applied for a transfer to the Moscow office. He turned to her, but not really to lie. She looked away, focusing on melting ice cream. And your career, London, your connections, everything you left for... He gave a bitter laugh. You know what's funny? I achieved everything I planned, and it hasn't brought a single ounce of happiness. She was silent, swallowing the lump in her throat. How easy it would be to revel in his remorse, his realization of the emptiness of what he'd sacrificed his real life for. But motherhood had taught her one crucial truth. There's no point in savoring another's pain. She had more than enough of her own. I want to be a part of their lives, he continued, a real part, not just a Sunday dad or a money bag, but a father. Wanting that is good, she replied, watching Matilda carefully feeding bread to the smallest duckling, protecting it from its larger siblings. But there are conditions, he straightened, as if preparing for business negotiations. I'm listening. No gifts the price of an apartment, no attempts to buy their love, no promises you can't keep, and most importantly, she turned to him, looking him directly in the eyes for the first time during their conversation, never disappear from their lives like you disappeared from mine. It's better not to appear at all than to leave when they've become attached. There was no reproach in her voice, only the steel forged in years of solitude. He met her gaze direct, demanding, piercing through the protective barriers he'd built over the years. He nodded fairly. More conditions. You won't insist that they take your surname. That's a decision they'll make themselves when they're ready. If they are. He flinched. In this condition stung more than he expected. The Ravenwood name carried weight, history, opened doors, but did he have the right to impose it on children he hadn't raised?
Agreed, he said after a pause. Anything else? She looked at the children feeding the ducks, at Alec, unusually serious for his age, always ready to defend his mother and sister, at Matilda with her stubborn chin and love for all living things, at the fruits of her labour, her blood, her sleepless nights. I am their mother, she said quietly, but firmly. The major decisions remain with me. Not because I'm better, but because I've been there all these years, and I know them like no one else. He nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. What could he counter with against 6 years of daily struggle and love? I agree. He extended his hand. It's a fair deal. This isn't a deal, Lex. She shook her head, ignoring his outstretched hand. This is our children's lives. He lowered his hand, feeling the weight of his guilt. As a businessman, he was accustomed to thinking in terms of contracts and agreements, but family wasn't built on signatures on paper. Mama, look! Alec ran to them, pointing at a family of ducks swimming on the pond. See, the little ones are swimming behind their mama duck. She's protecting them. Just like I protect you, Lai thought, but only nodded aloud. Yes, sunshine. Mamas always protect their children. And papas? The boy asked, turning to Alexei. Do papas protect too? The innocent question hung in the air. Alexei looked at Lai as if asking permission to answer. They should, she said, meeting his gaze. If they're real papas. Alec frowned, processing this information. Will you be a real papa? He asked, looking at Alexei with that childlike seriousness that pierces the soul. Or like Misha from kindergarten, who only comes on holidays and brings robots. Alexei knelt down, bringing himself to his son's level. I don't want to be a real papa, he answered honestly. But I'll need to learn a lot. Will you help me? Alec pondered for a moment, then nodded with the gravity of a diplomat signing a peace treaty. I'll help. I know all the rules. For example, Mama doesn't like it when we nap past noon, even if it's a weekend. Lai smiled, watching this exchange. Her son possessed so much wisdom, not from books, but from observing life wisdom his father had lacked 6 years ago, 4 years earlier in Moscow. Lai stood by a payphone on the corner of Builders Street. 2 children slept in a double stroller. The February wind pierced her thin coat, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Last chance, last attempt. She'd gotten the number for Alexei's London office through an acquaintance. An international call cost almost half her weekly earnings, but despair fueled her resolve. The rings in the receiver sounded different, longer, as if traversing thousands of kilometres, stretching across the distance. Morgan Stanley London office, how can I help you? A female voice answered with a distinct British accent. Hello. Lai switched to English, thanking all the gods for her university specialization in international relations. Well, I need to speak with Alexei. She hesitated. Who was she to him? An ex-girlfriend? The mother of his child? It's very important. Mr. Sterling is currently in a client meeting. The secretary cut her off. May I ask what this concerns? Alec was only 1, and the doctors had just diagnosed him with bilateral pneumonia. He needed expensive antibiotics she couldn't afford. It's personal. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Please, it's truly urgent. It's about my child's health. A pause. Whose child, excuse me? The secretary inquired coldly. Lai called her son's father. Another pause, this one longer. I'm afraid you're mistaken. A more formal voice came from the other end of the line. Mr. Vorontsov doesn't have any children. He's engaged to Miss Catherine Holcroft, daughter of Lord Holcroft. If you're trying... Despair crept into Lai's voice. Just tell him Lyudmila from Moscow called. Kakima, he knows me. I'll pass the message along, the secretary replied dryly.
Leave your number." Lai dictated the number of the university dormitory where a former roommate had taken her in, risking a violation of residency rules. She stood by the payphone for another 20 minutes, hoping for a return call. Alec woke up and began to whimper. His fever was rising again. She needed to return to the dormitory, administer the meagre supply of medicine. The call never came. Not that day, not the next, not for a week. When Alec's condition worsened and he was hospitalized, Lai sold the last remnants of her former life, her gold earrings, a birthday gift from Alexei. The very ones he'd put on her, whispering, "You'll be the most beautiful mother of our children." In the hospital she met an elderly Tatar nurse, like herself. The woman listened to her story and silently removed a silver amulet from her neck, ancient, blackened with age. "Herogenia achma, kuzeneach," she said, placing the amulet in Lai's palm. "Don't open your heart, open your eyes." An ancient Tatar proverb, "Men come and go, but you, mother, are the greatest power on earth." That night, sitting by her feverish son's bedside, Lai decided never to seek Alexei out again, never to ask him for help, never to let him know about their child. A decision she broke only 6 years later, upon receiving a wedding invitation. "Papa, is this your house?" Matilda craned her neck, taking in the bright apartment on the 12th floor of a new building on Preobrazhenskaya Square. Alexei smiled, helping the children remove their shoes in the hallway. Lee stood in the doorway, hesitant to enter. Crossing the threshold felt like acknowledging his claim to a territory in their lives. "Temporarily mine," he told his daughter. "I'm renting it." "It's bigger than ours," Alec observed, his tone devoid of envy, merely stating a fact. "And the windows are higher," Matilda countered. "But we have an apple tree outside our window, and a swing set in the courtyard." Lai smiled at her daughter. Yes, her children didn't have luxurious apartments or expensive toys, but they possessed something far more valuable, the ability to see wealth in simple things. "I have a surprise for you." Alexei winked at the children, or rather, an introduction. He opened the door to the living room, and a fluffy ginger creature the size of a small fox bounded out. A golden retriever with intelligent eyes and a wagging tail paused for a moment, surveying the newcomers, then slowly approached, politely sniffing each guest. "This is Boney," he introduced the dog, Alexei. "My dog," he said. "I brought her from London last week, as soon as the quarantine ended." Matilda squealed with delight, dropping to her knees and reaching for the animal. "Mummy, look, she's so beautiful." Alexei glanced quickly at Lai, but Talsh nodded, a gesture meaning everything was all right. She didn't say that she herself had dreamed of getting a dog for the children, but circumstances, their small apartment, long working days, and lack of help had made this dream impossible. Bonnie cautiously approached the girl, sniffed her outstretched hands, and then licked them, causing Matilda to erupt in happy laughter. Alec, more cautious, stayed back. "Does she bite?" he asked, hiding his hands behind his back. "Never," Alexei shook his head. "She's very kind and intelligent. I got her as a puppy 4 years ago when—" He hesitated, meeting Lai's gaze. "When I was engaged to Catherine, Lord Holcroft's daughter, when I was building a life where there was no place for Lai, or the children I didn't know existed, when I was trying to fill the emptiness inside," he finished. "Anyway, she's had special training. You don't need to be afraid." Alex slowly extended his hand, allowing the dog to sniff it. When Bonnie's warm tongue touched his fingers, the boy smiled, a rare, bright smile revealing a missing baby tooth. "She loves me," he said, surprised. "Right away. Dogs sense good people." Alexei nodded. "It's their superpower." Lai watched the scene in the hallway, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Joy at the children's happiness, pain at the realization that this dog This symbol of home and love had lived with Alexei while they struggled to survive. Hope that his desire to become a part of their lives wouldn't fade like many of his previous impulses. "I made dinner," Alexei said, looking at her questioningly. "Will you stay?" She was about to refuse, to say that the children could spend the day with him and she would pick them up in the evening, that she needed to work, to translate an article for a medical journal, the deadline for which was approaching. But something in his eyes, the uncertainty, the hope, the fear of rejection, made her change her mind. "Only if you didn't make risotto," she replied, taking off her coat. "Well, you always overcook the rice." He laughed, a genuine, relieved laugh. "Pasta with seafood. I took lessons from a real Italian in London." She raised an eyebrow. Alexei, the financial prodigy, had learned to cook. "I've learned a lot," he said, seriously. "For example, that money can't replace family." Her smile faded. It was too soon for such conversations. Too much unspoken pain stood between them. "Children, wash your hands and come to the table," she commanded, crossing the threshold of the apartment. "Let's see what your father has learned besides making money." When the children finally fell asleep, Alec on the sofa in the living room, Matilda curled up next to Bonnie on a dog bed, Alexei and Lai stepped onto the balcony. Nighttime Moscow spread before them, a sea of lights resembling a starry sky inverted onto the earth. "Thank you for staying," he said, offering her a glass of wine. "I know it wasn't easy." She accepted the glass, but didn't drink. "Why don't you have pictures of them?" she asked instead. "You could have found me on social media, seen their pictures, become interested." He looked away. "Your account was private, and the photos that were available, they didn't show the children." She nodded. It was true. After the incident with the phone call, she had become paranoid about protecting her privacy. Any hint of the children's existence had disappeared from the public sphere. "Oh, but you could have asked mutual acquaintances," she insisted. "I asked Gregory once," he admitted, "about 3 years ago. He said you were happy and asked me to leave you alone. I assumed you'd gotten married, built a new life." She smirked. "And you were glad to think that, weren't you? It freed you from guilt." He didn't deny it. That was also true. "I'm a coward, Lai," he said quietly. "Always have been." Behind all the ambition, the race, the success, the money, it's just fear. Fear of not meeting expectations, of not achieving goals, of not being good enough. "Fear of being like your father?" she asked, finally taking a sip of wine. He flinched. She always saw through him, always understood what he himself wouldn't admit. "Yes," he nodded. "My father was a good man, kind, honest, and he died at 40, leaving my mother with debts and broken promises. I swore to myself that I would never, ever be that vulnerable," she finished for him, "that you would ensure protection from all misfortunes with money and connections. Sounds pathetic." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their university days, when he was nervous, worried, unsure of what to say. "Well, not pathetic," she shook her head with genuine understanding. "But you know the irony. By insuring against one fate, you voluntarily chose another. Your father lived a short life, but it had real love. And you were going to live a long one, filled with, what? Business lunches, golf on weekends, business trips?" He was silent, gazing at the city lights. Once, those lights seemed to him a symbol of his goal, power, success, recognition. Now he saw in them only a reflection of the emptiness that threatened to consume his entire life. "You know what's the worst?" he finally said. "I almost married a woman I didn't love just because she fit my status. Annie wasn't bad, she was just part of the plan. Like an expensive watch, like a car of a certain make, I turned my life into a business strategy." Lai looked at him with a long gaze. Then, faintly, he smiled. Well, no, I know that real life isn't about plans. It's about Alex's joyous laughter building a tower of blocks, about how Matilda... She closed her eyes in pleasure, savouring the ice cream, 1,000 tiny moments that money couldn't buy. She turned away, hiding the sudden tears. This new Alexei, vulnerable, sincere, speaking of feelings, was more dangerous than the old one. Before she could counter with anger, with resentment, this she wanted to believe. "Forgive me," he said suddenly, taking a step towards her. "For everything. For not staying. For not looking for you. For not being there when they were born, when they were sick, when they took their first steps. For everything I don't deserve to regain." She closed her eyes, feeling the inner walls she had so carefully built over the years cracking at the seams. "I can't forgive you," she answered honestly. "Not now, maybe never. But I can allow you to be a father to them, if you truly want that." "If I'm ready for that," he nodded, more than ready. "I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I promise I won't let them down, even if we aren't meant to be." A phone call interrupted him mid-sentence. The number was unfamiliar, but with a Moscow code. "Excuse me?" He picked up the phone. "Yes." One moment. 2, 3. His face changed, becoming a mask. "I'm listening," he said, moving to the far corner of the balcony. Lyra watched him, feeling a long-forgotten sensation return, an intuitive understanding that something important was happening, something that could upset the fragile balance of their new reality. "This is unacceptable." Alexei's voice dropped to an icy whisper. "I'm not going to discuss this." Another pause. He listened, his grip on the phone tightening with each passing moment. "Never," he cut him off. "Do what you want, I won't return." He hung up and turned to Lyra. His face was pale but resolute. "Annie?" she asked, already knowing the answer. He nodded. "She's threatening to destroy my foundation. Her father has connections in the financial world, and if he decides—" He trailed off. "It doesn't matter. What does she want?" Lyra moved closer, intuitively sensing the answer. "For me to return, to forget about you. To continue the engagement as if nothing happened." Lyra stepped back, a wave of nausea rising in her throat. Here it was, the test, the true measure of what they had both learned over these years. "And what will you do?" she asked softly. He looked at her with a long gaze, the gaze of a man making a decision that would define the rest of his life. The one he should have made 6 years ago. A suitcase, bought 6 years ago at an Auchan sale, obediently received its contents: children's T-shirts with superheroes, jeans worn at the knees, well-loved books with dog-eared pages. Lyra packed them methodically, carefully, as she did everything in her life, with the measured precision only single mothers develop, knowing they have no room for error. Morning seeped through the loosely drawn curtains, painting stripes of light on the worn parquet floor. The silence was deafening. The apartment was unusually quiet, preparing to say goodbye to its inhabitants. 3 tickets to Kazan lay on the dresser, 3 thin rectangles of paper, a promise of a new beginning or an escape. She hadn't yet decided how to label what she was doing. Her phone vibrated again, the 6th time that morning. Alexei. She didn't answer. A week had passed since that night on the balcony, since Anastasia Dawn's phone call. A week of turmoil, doubt, and sleepless nights. A week in which she made the hardest decision since she chose to raise her children alone. "What do you believe in?" she asked herself, packing her clothes into a suitcase. "His words or your experience?" Experience screamed. "Run, run before he chooses his career over you again, before the children get too attached, before you start believing in this fairy tale of a reunited family." What did she know for sure? That Anastasia Dawn threatened to ruin his business? That the Sterling family had the connections to do it? That sooner or later he would face a choice again? And then what? Another 6 years alone with the pain. Only now that pain was doubled, multiplied by 2 children who had already started calling him Dad. No, not again, not her children. She took a small wooden box from the closet, a simple one bought at a market in Kazan. Inside were the remnants of her former life. A few photographs of her and Alexei laughing, arms around each other against the backdrop of Emgimo, a pressed rose from their first date, a note in his handwriting. I will love you until the Moskva River stops flowing. Empty words. The Moskva River still flowed, but their love had stopped somewhere over the Atlantic, halfway to London. Mama. Alec's voice pulled her from her memories. He stood in the doorway, clutching a worn teddy bear, the only toy he'd taken from Alexei's house the day they met Bonnie. Are we really leaving? She knelt, bringing herself to his level. Yes, sunshine, we're going to see Hazel. Remember how wonderful it is there in the summer. The river, the forest, fresh berries, and a star for breakfast. And Dad? Unshed tears welled in the child's eyes. Will he come with us? She swallowed the lump in her throat. It had taken Alexei only a month to become a father in their lives, reading bedtime stories, building with blocks, teaching him to ride a bike. All those small, priceless moments he'd missed in 6 years, he'd tried to cram into 30 days of frantic fatherhood. No, sweetie, Dad will stay in Moscow. He has things to do here. Alec frowned, processing the information with a seriousness that always frightened Lai. Will he forget us? He whispered. Just like when he left for London, her heart ached. Where did he learn that? She never... Olivia Ravenwood, of course. Olivia Ravenwood spent all her free time with her grandchildren, making up for lost years, telling them stories of the Ravenwood family. A story they were now a part of, whether Lai wanted that or not. She chose her words carefully. But you know, sometimes grown-ups get confused, she said, and they need time to sort things out. How are you feeling, honey? Alexei asked, unexpectedly. Are you confused, Mum? She froze, struck by his childlike perceptiveness. Yes, she was confused. For the first time in 6 years, she felt lost, unsure of the right decision, to run to protect her children from potential pain, or to stay, to give them a chance at a complete family, risking their hearts. A little, she admitted, pulling her son close, but I know one thing. No matter what happens, I'll always be with you. Always. He nodded, accepting this promise as only a child raised with absolute confidence in his mother's love could. Bonnie? He suddenly asked. We won't see Bonnie anymore. The dog. That golden retriever the children had grown fond of, the one that licked their hands and slept with its head on Matilda's lap. Another attachment, another thread to be broken. Maybe someday... She began, but stopped short, hearing footsteps in the hallway. Matilda stood leaning against the door jamb. Her usually lively face was closed off, the same mask Lai had seen in the mirror every morning for 6 years. Daddy's still leaving, right? The girl said with the disarming directness only children and very old people possess, like in that fairy tale about the princess everyone abandons. Lai's heart sank, the old Tatar tale Hazel used to tell, about a princess whose father went to war, promising to return but never did, a story about loss, about waiting, about the faithfulness of promises. No, sweetheart, she reached for her daughter, it's just us. You're lying, Matilda cut her off, and in that word there was so much childish pain, so much disappointment, that Lai physically stumbled. You said grown-ups always keep their promises, and Daddy promised he wouldn't leave again. Honey, it's us who are leaving, Lai tried to explain. Daddy's staying here.
So we're abandoning him, the girl demanded, like some wicked queen from a cartoon. Lai closed her eyes. How do you explain the complexities of the adult world to a 3-year-old? How do you talk about fear, mistrust, years of loneliness, about how sometimes you have to cut to preserve, that sometimes love isn't just hugs and bedtime stories, but also protection from future pain? Matilda knelt, her arms open. Sometimes to protect those you love, you have to make difficult decisions. But you always said you can't run away from problems, the girl insisted, not moving, that you have to be brave and solve them. Her own words, thrown back at her in a child's voice, her lessons, her mantras, her principles, everything she had instilled in her children from birth. To be strong, not to give up, to believe in the best. When had she herself stopped believing? The train to Kazan departed at 3:40 p.m., 3 hours until departure from Kazan station.
3 hours to gather the remnants of a life into 2 bags and a suitcase, 3 hours to leave behind the city where her children were born, where she built a translation career from scratch, where she met the only man she ever loved. It's strange how few things actually mattered: toys, books, clothes. These were merely the outer shell of their lives. The real treasures couldn't be packed. Alexei's laughter while feeding ducks in the park. Matilda's first steps towards the Christmas tree. The evenings they huddled together under one blanket, reading fairy tales and inventing stories. The phone vibrated again. This time the name on the screen was different. Liv, Alexander's mother. Lee hesitated for a moment, then pressed answer. Lyudochka. Liv's voice was anxious. Is it true? Are you leaving? So Alexander had told his mother. Of course he had. After all, she was the grandmother of his children, the grandmother who had only just found her grandchildren and was now losing them again. Yes, Olivia Ravenwood, Lai tried to speak calmly. We're going to my mother's in Kazan for the summer. It will be good for the children. Don't lie to me, girl, Olivia Ravenwood interrupted. I see through you. You're running, just like I did when his father died. Only I ran into work, and you're running to another city. Lai was silent. What could she say? Olivia Ravenwood's perceptiveness had always intimidated her. This woman, who had endured the loss of her husband, single motherhood, and years of struggle, saw a reflection of her own fate in Lai. You're afraid he'll leave you again, Olivia Ravenwood continued. Afraid he'll choose his career, his money, that Anastasia Dawn? Afraid to trust? Would you not be afraid? Lai blurted out after everything, after 6 years alone. I would be, the woman admitted unexpectedly.
Oh, how I would be afraid! But you know what I've learned in my life. Sometimes you have to give someone a chance, not for them, but for yourself. I can't risk their hearts. Lai shook her head. Though her interlocutor couldn't see her, they had only just found their father. They had become attached to him. What if he chooses his career, his money again? If Victor Sterling really destroys his business, how long will Lex play the exemplary father before he hates us for his failure? A heavy pause hung in the air, filled with unspoken fears and hopes. You know he refused the deal, Olivia Ravenwood finally said. The contract with the Arabs, the one he left for 6 years ago. Lai froze, a half-folded T-shirt in her hands. That Victor Sterling threatened him wasn't just a bluff, the woman continued. Lex was supposed to sign a contract with Sheikh Al Maktoum, a $1 billion agreement, but it required him to return to London permanently, and he refused. He said he wouldn't leave his children. The T-shirt fell from Lai's hands, but she didn't notice. Why didn't he tell me? She whispered. She knew he would see it as manipulation, Liv responded with the ruthless honesty only mothers possess. An attempt to play on his sympathy. You'd think he wants to appear heroic, sacrificing his career for his family. And she was right. That's exactly how Lyra would have perceived it. 6 years of solitude had taught her not to trust beautiful words and grand gestures. What will happen to him now? She asked quietly. Without that contract? I don't know, Liv answered honestly. Maybe Victor Sterling will really destroy his business. Maybe he'll lose everything he's built. But do you know what he told me yesterday? Mom, I already lost the most important thing once. I won't make that mistake again. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling a single tear roll down her cheek.
The older Ravenwood woman knew where to strike, straight at the heart she had so carefully protected all these years. I should go, she said, trying to regain her composure. We need to catch the train. Lyudochka, Liv's voice softened. I'm not asking you to stay. I'm not asking you to forgive him or to love him again. Just give him a chance to be a father. They deserve it, he and the children. When the call ended, Lyra stood in the middle of the room for a long time, looking at the scattered belongings, the tickets, the children's toys. What if Liv was right? What if the fear of losing again was stronger than her common sense? What if, trying to protect the children from possible future pain, she was depriving them of present happiness? But the choice was made. The tickets were bought, the suitcases almost packed. Sometimes you just have to move forward, even if your heart is breaking with doubt. Kazan station buzzed like a disturbed beehive. A sea of people surged, separating into streams, merging again, releasing those departing and absorbing those arriving. Lyra held her children's hands tightly, afraid of losing them in this whirlwind. Passengers for the Kazan train, departing from platform 3. A mechanical voice cut through the noise. Please take your seats. Mum, why didn't Dad come to see us off? Alec asked as they made their way to the platform. Because I didn't tell him, she wanted to answer. Because goodbyes only complicate farewells, because I'm a coward who couldn't leave while looking him in the eyes. He didn't know when exactly we were leaving, she lied, hating herself for the deception. He has an important meeting today. We'll call him when we arrive, she continued. We'll tell him about the train and Grandma Hazel. Of course we will, she forced a smile, helping the children climb onto the train. Their seats were by the window, 2 lower berths and 1 upper. Lyra settled the children, got out juice and cookies, and turned on the tablet with cartoons. Everything was as usual, as it had been 1,000 times before. Only now they weren't leaving for a vacation, but forever. Away from the father they had just found, away from Grandma Liv, who baked them. Every Sunday they baked pies, from the dog, who wagged its tail at the mere sound of their voices. Was she doing the right thing? This question gnawed at her, giving her no peace. What if running away wasn't a solution, but only a postponement of the inevitable? What if, by protecting her children from one pain, she was simply replacing it with another? Passengers were asked to say goodbye to those seeing them off. 5 minutes until departure. The mechanical voice announced the time again. Matilda pressed her face against the window, studying the platform. Her eyes, usually bright and curious, were now dull. Alec quietly fiddled with the edge of his T-shirt, a gesture that appeared only when he was nervous. They felt something was wrong. Children always do, no matter how hard adults try to hide their fears and doubts. Children see through them with their special childlike vision, a vision adults lose along with their belief in miracles. "Mum, look!" Matilda suddenly exclaimed, coming alive and pointing at the window. There were her father and Bonnie. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. This couldn't be happening. She hadn't told anyone about the departure time, except Liv. Of course, who else? She forced herself to look out the window. There, pushing through the crowd on the platform, ran Alexei. Behind him, straining at the leash, raced Golden Bonnie. They were making their way through the throng, clearly heading towards their carriage. "Dad!" Alec cried, jumping up from his seat and rapping on the glass. "Dad, we're here!" The conductor cast a disapproving glance at them, but Lyra barely noticed. All her attention was fixed on the figure approaching their window. He was without his jacket, only in a shirt, despite the cool June day. His hair was dishevelled, his face flushed from the quick run. This was how she last saw him 12 years ago, when they were taking their final university exams, and he'd rushed straight from a jog to bring her a lucky charm, a feather found under the windows of Moscow State University. Alexei stopped by their window, looking at Lyra and the children. His eyes pleaded desperate, and something else, something she was afraid to even name in her mind. "Let me in." His voice barely reached them through the closed window. "Lie, please." Matilda was already tugging at the door handle, but Lyra stopped her. "No, honey, the train is about to leave." "But it's Dad," the girl protested. "He came for us." "He came to see us off," Lyra corrected, feeling each word stick in her throat. Alexei shouted something to them, but the noise of the platform drowned out his words. Bonnie rose onto her hind legs, her front paws against the train's wall, as if trying to reach the children. "Look at him," Alex suddenly said quietly, but with that unchildlike seriousness that always made Lyra's heart clench. "He doesn't want us to go, Mum. He's crying." And indeed, tears streamed down Alexei's face. He stood on the platform looking like a lost boy, not a successful financier, silently repeating the same word. A word. Lee could read his lips, even without hearing him. "Stay," he mouthed. The train pulled away slowly, almost reluctantly, as if fate itself was giving her one last chance to change her mind. Alexei ran alongside the platform, his eyes fixed on the window where she and the children sat. Bonya raced beside him, a flash of gold amongst the people. "Daddy's running after us!" Matilda shouted, pressing her face against the glass again. Lai closed her eyes, unable to watch. Why was he making it even harder? Why couldn't he just let them go, allow them to start a new life without the fear of being abandoned again? The platform was ending. The train was about to pick up speed. Alexei would be left behind. First, a figure in the distance, then a dot on the horizon, then just a memory in the children's hearts. "Mama, stop the train," Alec demanded, tugging at her sleeve. "Daddy wants to say something. We can't stop the train, sweetie." She shook her head. "That's not how it works." "But you said yourself that nothing is impossible for love," the boy exclaimed. He'd twisted her own words, the words she whispered to her children before bed. Her stories about true love conquering all obstacles, her fairy tales of princes overcoming all barriers for their beloveds, her faith which she held in her heart, even when life repeatedly proved her wrong. She faltered, not knowing what to answer. At that moment, Alexei, dishevelled and breathless but resolute, appeared in the train corridor. How had he managed to jump onto a departing train? How had he convinced the conductor to let him on without a ticket? What words had he found to explain the madness of his actions? He stopped by their compartment, clutching the doorframe to avoid falling as the accelerating train lurched. "Lie, please, just listen 1 minute," he pleaded. The children looked at their father with delight. For them, it was a scene from a real-life adventure, but Lai saw the man who had once broken her heart, the man she was afraid to trust again. "Are you crazy?" she said, rising. "I can't lose you again," he interrupted, taking a step towards them. "I can't, and I won't." The train swayed on a curve, and he almost fell but caught himself on a handrail. "Alexei?" Weariness laced Lai's voice. "You can't just jump on a train and change everything. Life doesn't work that way." "I know," he nodded.
I know I don't deserve a second chance, that I hurt you, that I was a coward and a selfish man, but I've changed, Lai, I swear it. Words. She shook her head. Just words. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. Look. It was a withdrawal from an international contract with the Al Maktoum Holding. $1 billion. Lai's career-defining contract. She took the document, scanning the lines of the official withdrawal. The names of sheikhs, Eastern titles, enormous sums, everything he had once left her for. Why? She could only ask. Because my constant presence was required in Dubai. For at least 3 years he had looked her directly in the eyes, while I promised my children I would never leave again. The train was gaining speed, rhythmically clicking on the rail joints. Outside the window, the last suburbs of Moscow flowed by. Grey panel buildings mixed with bright new constructions, a symbol of the Russia they knew.
A country of contrasts, a country of pain and hope. I don't ask you to love me again, Alexei continued, kneeling before the children. I only ask for one thing. Let me prove that I'm needed, that I can be a real father, a real support. Matilda, unable to contain herself, threw her arms around his neck with the absolute trust only small children possess. Alex stood slightly to the side, cautious as always when it came to emotions. "Will you come with us to Kazan?" the boy asked, seriously. "To Hazel's?" Alexei turned to Lai, still holding Matilda. "If Mama allows it," he said, "I'll go anywhere, even to the ends of the earth. Just don't push me away again." Lai looked at them, at Matilda, tightly hugging her father, at Alec, observing the unfolding scene cautiously but with hope, at Alexei, whose eyes held a plea mixed with determination. And what did she feel? Fear, of course, a deep, bone-deep fear of trusting again and being betrayed again. But there was something else. The weariness of constant solitary struggle. A longing for a shoulder to lean on, a shy, uncertain hope that maybe, just maybe, people really do change. The old nurse's voice echoed in her memory. "Don't open your heart, open your eyes." And she looked at the man before her with wide-open eyes. Not at the self-assured boy who chose career over love, but at a man who had passed through his own desert of loneliness and understood the value of true things. He was shaking, not from cold, but from the fear of losing them again. His hands, holding his daughter, were the hands of a man ready to fight for his happiness, not run from difficulties. "It's nice in Kazan now," she finally said. "The lilacs are blooming, and the apple trees too." He looked at her, not understanding what lay behind those words. Acceptance? Refusal? A postponement of the inevitable? "Do you have a ticket to the next station?" she asked practically. "Or are you planning to ride to Kazan without one?"
I didn't think that far ahead," he stammered. "I just saw the departing train and ran." For the first time in the entire conversation, she smiled, weakly, uncertainly, but sincerely. "You've always been impulsive," she shook her head. "It's good you at least have your passport with you." "Always," he patted his shirt pocket. "After that incident on the Finnish border," he added. She remembered. Their first trip abroad together, when he'd forgotten his documents, and they spent half a day in the transit zone, making up stories about who they would be in 10 years. How naive they had been, how wistful their dreams had been, and how cruelly life had shattered them into fragments they had spent years painstakingly piecing back together, separately. "We need to tell the conductor you're coming with us," Lyra decided, rising. "And I'll buy you a ticket to Kazan. I don't think you'd be happy getting off in Mukhtavolo," he stammered, disbelieving his ears. You'll let me come with you?" "I'm not promising anything beyond this trip," she cautioned. "No vows of eternal love, no happily ever after. Just a chance to get to know each other again." She nodded towards the children. They both knew it wasn't only for the children. It was for her too. For the woman who had carried her burden alone for 6 years and deserved at least an attempt to share it. For the girl who had once dreamed of an apple orchard and a great love that would withstand any trial. "Thank you," he said simply. The train sped eastward, carrying them all into an unknown future, filled with both fear and hope. Ahead lay Kazan with its minarets and old streets, its river and apple orchards, with Hazel and her wisdom passed down through generations. Lyra didn't know what awaited them there. Would Alexei become a part of their lives, or would he run away again when things got tough?
Would he learn to wake up at night to crying children, to make chicken soup at the first sign of a cold, to mend ripped jeans? But today, watching him tell the children a story about a goldfish in the Kazanka River, she allowed herself something she hadn't done in 6 long years: hope. Kesh Bhakti Kulinda Tugel Yeragenda, Hazel used to say. A person's happiness isn't in their hands, but in their heart. And perhaps it was time to let her heart open again, slowly, cautiously, looking back, but open. Matilda fell asleep in her father's arms, her head resting on his shoulder. Alec was quiet, gazing out the window at the passing scenery. And Lyra thought about how life, like this train, sometimes rushes at full speed, sometimes slows down on curbs, sometimes stops at small stations, offering a respite. But the main thing is not to get off halfway, not to be afraid of sharp turns. And maybe sometimes you need to let someone jump onto your train at full speed. If that person is ready to ride with you to the final station, however long the journey may be. The train continued its journey, carrying Lyra, Alexei, and their children, not to a definitive answer, but to a possibility, a chance to heal old wounds and build something new on the ruins of the past. In this journey, they are like each of us, carrying the weight of past decisions, mistakes, missed opportunities, but also the hope that tomorrow can be different if we find the strength to trust again. What do you think? Did Lyra do the right thing by giving Alexei a second chance, or was his betrayal too deep to deserve forgiveness? Is it possible to build a real family on the foundation? Broken hearts, mended hearts. What are your thoughts? Share your opinions in the comments. Did your story resonate, or would you have acted differently? If this story touched your heart, please like and share it with your friends. Someone might be facing a similar choice and seeking answers. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay updated with new stories about the complexities of love and forgiveness. You'll find a playlist with all our channel's stories below this video. Stories that remind us that even in the deepest darkness, light can be found if you know where to look. Yölelbaşı ayak astinda, says Tatar wisdom. The beginning of the path is under your feet. Sometimes you just need to take that first step.